My name's Jean Gaffin, and for a year or so, around 1953, and then after a gap of a year, a few more months afterwards, I was Gerry Raffles' secretary and typed and did all sorts of things at the theatre with great pleasure. It was a fun place to work. In the war, I was evacuated, coming back when I was about 8 years old, and my mum started to take me to the theatre. One of the theatres we started to go to in the late 40s was Theatre Royal Stratford. It was very near us, and it was run by an actor-manager called David Horn, who managed to star in most of the plays. It was a very bog-standard repertory company, and we went a few times, and suddenly the theatre closed and David Horn's company disappeared. I don't know where to. And then I read an art piece in the Stratford Express to say some company had taken over theatre work, the Theatre Royal, and were looking for volunteers to help decorate it. So my two friends, Coral and Heather, and we thought, oh, that's fun. But all theatre buffs, all theatre fans in our teens. I was about 17 then. And I had a very nice job. I was the assistant secretary. I was the secretary to the assistant secretary of the Institution of Production Engineers in the West End. And I was very happy in my job. And we started to do things. I remember particularly painting the radiators a dark red and sweeping up and just trying to make the theatre presentable because it had been empty for a while. And one day I finished the painting and I said to Gerry, what do you want me to do? And he said, the lavatories need cleaning. And I said to Gerry Raffles, nice Jewish girl that I was, I don't know how to clean lavatories. He said to me, what else do you do? I said, I type. He said, do you want a job? And how much do you earn? I said, I'm earning £3 a week. He said, I will give you £3.10 to come and be my secretary. So I went and gave my notice in. My parents were shocked to the core. My boss at the Institution of Production Engineers phoned my parents to say, what have I done? Because in those days people got a job and stayed there for 40 years. Anyway, so there I am going into this totally new world to me as Gerry Raffles' secretary. And it meant being more than a secretary because if they needed somebody to go to the baker's to buy the rolls for that evening's performance, they needed somebody to tear tickets one evening, be an usherette, work in the box office, all that and the typing and the secretary work as well. It was the happiest year of my life. Absolutely happy. And I made friendships there that still continue. And I have some incredible memories of those early years of really, really wonderful theatre put on by people who were squatting in the theatre and because they were on benefits were earning less than me because it was a collective. They shared the takings and sometimes there were hardly any takings at all. I think the nadir was when we put on Uranium-235 by in Ewan McCall, who was Joan's first husband, because it was a really weird sort of avant-garde type of theatre. I remember not understanding it, and not many people came. I remember a wonderful Eugene O'Neill play they put on, also very small audiences. First time I'd seen Eugene O'Neill, absolutely knocked me out. And there was just so much good theatre. And some of the people there became, of course, very famous, like Harry Corbett. One memorable production we had was we put on Richard II, and we put it on at exactly the same time as the Old Vic had Richard II. And Harry Corbett, who then became Steptoe and Son, was a very, very brilliant young actor, and he played Richard very, very well. And we managed to get a little tiny bit of publicity because we'd spent about 40 or £50 on the costumes and the set because we did a lot of recycling of clothes and sets. And this was compared with the Old Vic, which of course had put on a really posh production and spent a lot of money. And that was a little bit of publicity. But the audiences really only started to come on following the miraculous time when Kenneth Tynan came. And once you get good reviews in the Observer, we took off and people came not just from nearby but from town and posh places like Hampstead and came to see the plays. One of the many jobs I had was to type some of the plays. So, for example, when Brendan Behan wrote The Quare Fellow, I typed that up. He was an amazing man because I didn't really, I came from a very stage Jewish background, and I'd never met anybody drunk before. And Brendan Behan was often very drunk, and he wished me to be the mother of a bishop, and I thought I'd better not tell him I'm Jewish because I don't want to be the mother of a bishop. But he was great fun, and Joan really rewrote most of the play, although she didn't sort of make a thing of it. Quare Fellow was brilliant, absolutely brilliant play. The other play that was very memorable to type was Joan got permission from the Brecht company in East Germany to put on the first performance of Mother Courage in the UK, and it had to be typed. In those days, you typed on a wax paper, which then went into a Gestetner machine. And every time you made a mistake, and because of the standard of my typing, I made a lot, you had to block off the hole that the keys had made with that letter with a red sort of kind of filler in, or I can't remember what it was called. And so my scripts, when they came to be Gestetner, looked like somebody with measles, red spots all over them. And it was a very fraught time, actually, because they wanted Joan to play Mother Courage, and she'd already cast somebody else, and so it was all a bit fraught. And also the other thing, I hadn't really known anything about Brecht or what he stood for. And I remember crying when I typed it in the scene where her daughter dies, and then reading about alienation and realised that I was very emotional. I should not have been crying then. I just should have appreciated it, in the, what Brecht was trying to achieve. So that was very interesting and a slightly difficult time, I think, for the company. It's very difficult to remember because it was a long time ago what the day was, but I always knew that when I went in the morning, I would not really know what I was going to do. There may be a set thing, you have got to finish typing that play, but normally things just happened. People came in, people would ring, people would come, but there was a lot of work, and it was all very, very manual. So one of the things I found difficult was doing the books. And so Gerry often arranged for people to come in, sometimes volunteers. So, for example, when they'd been staying in Essex before they came to move into the theatre where some of them lived in those early weeks and months, Tom Braddock was a well-known gay MP, and he did have a wife. And his wife would come sometimes in from Essex and come and help me with the books. Another one who helped me with the books was Eutha Joyce, who became a very famous actress in a sitcom with Brian Murphy, who was very, very gregarious and friendly actor there, and she wasn't in everything, and she used to come and help me with the books because Joan didn't have any job for her to do at the theatre. So it was all extraordinary. But very informal, just lovely atmosphere of, and I have to keep saying time and time again, putting on miraculously wonderful plays. Really, the standard of acting, of design, of the costumes. I am going back 60 years of my life, and I can still see the set for The Good Soldier's Fife, which was black and white, which was very original in those days. I can remember The Prince and the Pauper, where Camel, also known as John Berry when he went to the RSC, had got a medieval street, and you got the depth of a medieval street. All these extraordinary visual memories, as well as the kind of grind of typing another bloody play. And pleasing people, because I wanted to please Gerry, because of course I had a crush on him. I wanted to please Gerry. I was, like many people there, frightened of Joan, so I didn't want to do anything that might upset her. And it was the most exciting and enjoyable and really wonderful working. I've had a really interesting career, but nothing touches it for excitement and pleasure and usually not knowing what was going to happen next. I had very little to do with Joan. She was always a presence at the theatre, and I was shocked as a young girl that Gerry used to go and buy her sanitary towels and things like that for her, and he absolutely worshipped her. And I didn't see her much, so if she was rehearsing and I needed to walk through the theatre to get something from the other side of the theatre, I would go all the way up to the gallery, creep across the back of the gallery stairs and down the other side in order not to be noticed by Joan. And it's really sad that my real strong memory of Joan is a day when she came and told me off, berated me in a very, very harsh way, really, because Gerry had been diagnosed with diabetes, which obviously worried her. And I forgot to remind him of a really crucial appointment about getting some funding from West Ham Council, as it was then. And it's a sort of, I'm sure people praised me during that year, but I could only remember being told off by Joan as the most sort of awful moment of the time with them. They didn't spoil it, but you just don't forget being told off by Joan Littlewood. And I'm sure there are actors and actresses all around the country who would say the same thing. Certainly in those days, it was very left-wing and very much run as a collective, so that the money was shared, as I think I've explained. And so one of the things I might do is send a telegram to the Prime Minister protesting about something or other that had gone on in Cuba or South America or anywhere that they disapproved of. And that also made it for a very special sort of atmosphere, really. So I was already in the Labour Party, so it was kind of, that suited me too. And then there was the kind of collective attitude to money of if they were takings, they were shared. Now, in the early days, there was times when there was no money, and Gerry's father had a factory or a business in Manchester, and Gerry hated it, but he used to have to go up. He didn't have to, but he did, went up to his father to get, well, I suspect it wasn't borrowing, to get some money from his father to tide us over. And so I never not got paid. But I know there were some very, very lean weeks for other people in the theatre. So it was very hand to mouth at the beginning, really hand to mouth. But I think the actors and actresses and I were kind of dedicated in a way. I'm sure people are still dedicated to the theatre, but when I look at theatre programmes now, huge numbers of staff. I can't believe it when I think back to magical theatre of the highest possible quality, put on by a couple of girls who made the costumes and went up to Berwick Street Market to buy the materials as cheaply as possible and recut and cut and cut again the clothes they were making. And then John Berry would design the props, and Harry Smith, who made the sets, he would be carving up, cutting up the wood he used last time to make something else this time. It was very hand to mouth in all the departments, and it was very exciting to be part of it. One of the many things I think people forget is how puritanical the world was in 1953 and those mid-50s. I'll give you two examples. First of all, we had to submit every play to the Lord Chamberlain. I had a lovely file of correspondence with him, which of course I wished I'd kept, but I didn't. And the only example I can remember was we put on a play, again, I can't remember the title of it, which was set on a building site. And Joan wanted a little bit of kind of builder's type of banter to be unscripted and a bit improvised. And the Lord Chamberlain said, no, I had to know the words they would use because they could have sworn or something. And nowadays you could argue that trigger warnings serve the purpose that the Lord Chamberlain did, but I'm not so sure. The other thing we have to remember is that that homosexuality was illegal. And one performance of a play, the police came during a performance to arrest a young man who'd been caught, a young actor acting in the play who'd been caught cottaging. And Gerry had to spend that evening, part of the evening, dissuading them from arresting him until the play ended. And that was really it's shocking to talk about it now, but then it was the norm. So, just thought, why did he do it? It's really difficult to pick out what was my favourite shows, because so many were very good. And I don't want to forget, in talking about plays, to forget the fundraising folk concerts that were sometimes put up with Ewan McCall and Peggy Seeger, which were absolutely outstanding, as you could imagine. The plays are difficult to sort of categorise, but so we put on plays that hadn't been done for a long time, like Arden of Faversham, which was I can't remember the period, but a period drama where I remember again Harry Corbett being outstanding. We didn't do much Shakespeare, but we did Richard II at the same time as the Old Vic, and again Harry Corbett was outstanding. The Good Soldier Schweik, which I hadn't even heard of in those days but have now read, was absolutely again outstanding, and George Cooper I remember very well playing the part. And then there was The Prince and the Pauper, which was about, I think it was Mark Twain's story, which was, again, very, very good visually and sort of play that you remember. I wish I could remember the title of the first Eugène Ornay play I ever saw, but it made me want to go and see his plays all the time. We did the avant-garde one I remember and not particularly liking was Ewan McCall's Uranium 235. And then there was one summer when Gerry, to raise money, let the theatre out to a gentleman who had a mistress or a wife who was an aspiring actress. So he put on a play that she could star in, and it was called The Country Wife by William Wycherley. And one of the most memorable things about it was one of the reviews. I managed to get some people to come and review it. A reviewer who said, "This is a new form of Bowdlerisation. You cut out all the clean bits." And it very, very good-looking, extraordinarily good-looking young director who then became ever so famous because it was Tony Richardson, and it may well have been the first play that he did, that he directed. So that brought us in a bit of money, and it was quite fun to watch. And then I wasn't there for What a Lovely War. I'd gone by then, but I obviously went back to see it, and that was absolutely, just so memorable. Yeah. I'm very lucky because my mother, as soon as the war was over, started to take my sister and I to the theatre, queuing up for gallery tickets in the West End. So I saw all the greatest actors that there were around at the time, the Ashcrofts, the Richardsons, the Gielguds, you name them, I saw them in the West End. So I loved the theatre. And the opportunity to play a little part, a very small part, in such a dynamic, exciting, wonderful, wonderful theatre such as Theatre Workshop in that year is really, for somebody who likes going to the theatre, amazing. And what I'm very pleased about too is that my daughter caught the bug from me that I'd caught from my mother, and actually was a very busy actress for 10 years till she had her children, and unfortunately it's much more difficult to get it in again. And her daughter, who I started to take to the theatre at an early age as well, is doing a performing arts degree, doing a degree which has performing arts as part of it, as well as creative writing and filmmaking, and is actually going off to Edinburgh with the University Drama Society to be in a play. So I kind of feel in the middle of 4 generations all loving the theatre, and the centre of it is my luck in having got that job at Theatre Workshop and living it and loving it.